Hey everyone, this is the second part of thinking cognition notes. This is going to be centered mostly around problems that we can have or things that can lead to faulty problem solving or making decisions that are either not the correct decision to be made or just a faulty judgment or solution. It doesn't mean that these things that we're going to talk about always lead to negative outcomes or anything like that. It just means that these can lead you to make possible incorrect solutions or judgments or decision making because of it. Um, so we'll jump right in. A mental set is basically whenever basically it's whenever we fall into a similar pattern of thinking that's worked in the past. So because it worked that one time, you just continue to use it, and sometimes that's not the best way to go about solving a problem or coming to a conclusion or a solution or making judgments or whatever. Um, it doesn't mean that the decisions that we make will always be wrong if we follow the same decision making over and over and over again. It just means that sometimes we need to reevaluate um, the way that we go about making decisions because of the scenario we're in or the situation we're in, and not just falling into old patterns that have worked in the past. Basically, this is not mental sets. Basically, it's not adapting to situations. It's not um, it's not changing based on the the environment or the scenario that is in front of you. Just as an example, as a coach, I have opinions on what I believe the best philosophies to be about offense and defense and baseball and everything, but and pitching and hitting and bunting and all that. But I also recognize that calling a certain play or strategy sometimes, and it might work one time, it might not necessarily work every time, and I may need to dictate or I may need to adapt my thinking based on the current situation rather than whether or not it has worked in the past. So that's just one example of fault. It's what a mental set does. Is it's just the tendency that we have to continue using belief systems or solutions and solve problem solving strategies that have worked in the past. Um, the next one, functional fixedness. This is a term that um, tends to show up pretty regularly on the AP exam. I don't really have a reason why, but it's just something that I've seen a lot of questions over the years where this is featured in some way. Basically, this is our tendency to only look at something in the way that it was designed or the usual way that it's used. Um, so, in other words, we don't think about innovation or unusual ways to use something. The picture on the right is meant to kind of display functional fixedness. Sometimes this is called fixation as well. But the picture on the right on the bottom, that is a that is a pair of scissors that has been jammed into a cordless drill that looks as if it was used to mix up cake batter instead of a food mixer um, or I'm completely blanking on the kitchen tool. You see how much I bake. But obviously, that power drill and that pair of scissors was not designed to be used in a kitchen to mix up cake batter. However, it seems to suggest it was used in this scenario. Another example that I usually tell in class, and I'll try to be quick. When I was in college, I lived in a dorm for a couple of years, and usually it was four rooms in a suite shared one bathroom. So you had 8 guys basically using the same bathroom, and they have places where you can kind of put stuff in there, but there's not a lot of storage or anything. Most people just kind of keep their own stuff in their room and just take it back and forth to the bathroom. But anyway, one of my suite mates one year decided that he did not want to take his toothbrush back and forth. He would rather leave his toothbrush in the bathroom. So, but there was no toothbrush holder in the bathroom. And being a cheap college student, he wasn't going to go buy a toothbrush holder. So, what he did was he took the box that his toothpaste came in and taped it to the wall, and then just took scissors or a knife and just poked holes into the box and just slid his toothbrush into it. And again, not the way that box is designed, but he thought outside the box and literally get sorry. But basically, that's thinking outside the box. So in other words, functional fixedness is the inability to see those things. It's basically just looking at something, seeing how it was designed, and only using it for that way, and not thinking about things in an innovative or unconventional way. It basically, functional fixedness is a way to it basically causes you to not see possible ways to use objects or things in other than how they were originally designed or the customary way in which they're used. So because of that, it can lead you to have faulty thinking and maybe not necessarily think about things the way or in a way that could be useful or solve problems or create a solution. Okay. Confirmation bias. Everybody is guilty of confirmation bias. Unfortunately, we see this all the time with social media and with news networks and things like that. But basically, confirmation bias is basically the our own personal preference to look for information that confirms things that we already believe or have in our understanding. And then also on the furthermore, we tend to discount or ignore information that goes against those beliefs that we have. So people, just as an example, not trying to start anything or get into any type of political discussion or anything like that, but people who are more conservative with their beliefs would probably be more likely to watch Fox News because it is going to give them confirmation bias on those beliefs. On the flip side, people who have liberal beliefs will probably be more likely to watch or to get information from MSNBC or a similar news network because it tends to be more liberal and therefore it's going to be confirmation bias for their beliefs. We see this all the time in politics, we see it in religion, we see it in anything in which there are strongly held belief systems. And confirmation bias basically just says that because of the belief systems we have, we tend to have a preference for the information that confirms what we believe. We have a preference for the things that confirm the bias that we have. The problem with this is that it can lead you to not necessarily see the whole picture sometimes, or you only see one side of an argument and you discount the other side of the argument, or you tend to just completely ignore anything that might challenge those belief systems that you have. And some people don't care about the other side. Some people don't want to see the other side of a story or of a belief system, excuse me. But again, that's what confirmation bias does. It's a pre-existing preference, or a preference for something that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. All right, so I told you in the first part of thinking, the first video for thinking, that I would talk about a couple of different types of heuristics that can lead to problems. So there's availability and representative, and these can get confusing, and these have shown up on the AP exam, by the way, on free responses. So they're both heuristics. And if you remember from the first video, heuristics are a shortcut in thinking that eliminates possible correct solutions. In other words, these are patterns that we tend to use, shortcuts we tend to use because of a certain belief that we may have or a certain way that we think about things. It's shortcut thinking based on certain things. So availability heuristic is basically, it says judging the likelihood of an event based on readily available personal experiences or news reports. And the video, or excuse me, the picture on the right is, obviously being a little extreme, but you see 12 dying, the airplane crash, and the person says, "I'm never going to fly again." Yes, if you have never flown or you never have experienced that, and all you have to go off of is a negative news report, then yeah, you may make that decision because of what you have in front of you. In other words, you make a shortcut in thinking or a judgment or a decision or a problem or a solution based on what is available in your mind at that moment. If you don't have any personal connection to the information, then you can only go off of what you've seen, read, heard, whatever. The example I use in class is I usually ask how many people, or if I'm going to give you two cities, and I want you to tell me which one you think has the higher murder rate per within their population. And I say Chicago and Gary, Indiana. Now, most people have, at least when I say this, usually most people have not heard of Gary, Indiana. Okay. But they've heard of Chicago, and they've read things in the news about how violent Chicago can be and how many gun related deaths and things like that there have been over the years in Chicago. So usually if I ask, okay, which one, because they don't have that information with Gary, Indiana, they just assume, okay, well, I know Chicago is violent, probably more violent than Gary, Indiana. I'm going to go with Chicago. And usually they'd probably be right, but Gary, Indiana actually does have a higher murder rate. Now, they didn't know that because they have no personal understanding or information about Gary, Indiana. So it's not that like they made a poor decision. They just used the decision. They made the decision based on the information that they had available to them at that moment. Sometimes that can still lead to correct solutions, but in this case, it led to an incorrect solution. So again, like I said at the beginning of this video, these things don't always lead to incorrect solutions. However, because they're ways that can have faulty thinking, they can possibly lead to incorrect solutions. And another example is a representative heuristic. Now, representative heuristics are when you judge the likelihood of an event or make a decision based on how well something matches up to a typical example that you may have in your mind. So these can be stereotypes, these can be belief systems, they can be anything. So this would be like the one that I love to talk about is, obviously you guys know I'm not short. Okay. So there have been many times, too many that I can count, where I'll meet somebody for the first time and their comment about my height is, "Oh, bet you played basketball." All right. And I did. Okay. They're not wrong in that assumption, but because in their mind, tall person equals basketball player. So that is a typical example in their mind. So they made a judgment based on that. Again, in saying that to me, yeah, I played it through high school. Yeah, so technically they are right. However, there is always the chance that they could be completely wrong. I have a friend, more of an acquaintance. He married one of my wife's really good friends from college. He is 6'11". He is literally almost 7 feet tall, and he never played basketball growing up. And people see him and they meet, basketball player, 7 foot tall basketball player. He wasn't. He didn't play. So, but that doesn't mean that they made a poor decision. It just means that they made the judgment and the decision on the representation of something in their mind. It just happened to be wrong in this instance. Whereas probably most of the time you see a guy who's 7 foot tall, he's probably going to be a basketball player. Just saying. So anyway, there's that. Okay, a couple of other quick things, and then we're done. Intuition is kind of a gut feeling. You just you go with your gut intuition. and this is quick acting, automatic, just kind of spur of the moment decision. It doesn't always use logic. It doesn't always use reasoning. You just go with the gut feeling you have. Um, and sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. So an example, belief perseverance is, when you, this is an example of how intuition can lead to faulty thinking. When you hold on to beliefs that there's evidence that you're wrong and you still hold on to those beliefs. The example I always use is there are still people out there who believe that the earth is flat. All the scientific evidence points to the earth not being flat, and yet they hold on to those beliefs. Those beliefs persevere. That's where that term comes from, because in their gut, in their mind, they just have a gut feeling that they are right in this way of thinking. So that's belief persevering. And framing. Framing is more the way things are put in a context. So, for example, this would be like um, the way that things are phrased. The example I always use with this would be, if there was a commercial for this new drug that was going to prevent some type of health condition, and it came out and said that this drug has an 80% success rate. Okay, you hear that and you're like, it's pretty good, 80%. That's good. Okay, but let's say you see a commercial for a very similar drug and it says it has a 20% failure rate. Okay, well, that's framed in a more negative way, but it's the same information. But 20% is kind of high. I mean, you'd probably want it lower if you were using it. So it's the same information, but the way that it's framed causes your intuition to maybe go in different directions based on the way that it's put into context. And because of that, basically, framing can um, influence how your gut reaction is to information. Um, okay, I think this is the last. Yeah, so this is the last slide. So create. So basically what this just is saying is that when it comes to creativity, there's really kind of two ways we can go about trying to solve problems and create understanding of something: divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Divergent thinking is when basically there's a problem you're trying to solve, but you think about it in like a way of like all these different possible solutions to this problem. So it's a major element in creativity. Basically, it's saying that, okay, this is what I want, like this is what I'm trying to get to, but I'm going to go about it in all these different ways. That's divergent thinking. Convergent thinking is when you try to converge on a single answer. Basically, this is more mathematical, scientific thinking. But again, convergent thinking is when you are basically trying to converge on a single answer. That's where that term comes from. So divergent would be like going out from a problem, going out to possible solutions. Convergent is trying to hone in on a single answer or a single type of answer. So again, this is more mathematical, scientific thinking, very less common in creativity. Okay. So I think that's it. Yep, that's it for thinking. One more video on language, and we are done with this second content topic. So I'll see you guys then.